The drill was already in the third lock when I came up the walk, and my father's key was already in my hand, the one that was supposed to open the door. A stranger was busy changing. I heard it before I saw it. That high, grinding whine a power drill makes when it's biting into metal, and a locksmith on one knee in front of my own front door, working the bottom deadbolt while two finished ones sat shiny and new above it. My suitcases were on the lawn. Both of them, the gray hard shell and the soft blue one I'd had since college, lying in the wet grass like something the trash truck missed. For 7 years, I had paid the property taxes on that house. I had paid for a new roof when the old one started letting water into the kitchen, and I had come home from a 14-hour shift to find my own life dumped on the grass and my key locked out of the door I'd been keeping the lights on inside. There were 4 words my mother said on that lawn that I still hear. I'll tell you what they were, and I'll tell you what the worn brass key in my hand turned out to do to the door they thought they'd just closed on me. But you have to stand on the wet grass with me first. It had rained that afternoon. The grass was soaked. So were my clothes, the ones that had spilled out when the soft bag tipped open, a sleeve of a sweater dark with water, one shoe sitting upside down near the flower bed I planted 2 springs ago. My mother was at the front window, Linda, standing just inside the glass with her arms crossed, watching me look at my own life dumped on the grass, and she did not come outside. The key was warm from my fist, the brass worn smooth on the edges from years of my father's thumb, and I stood on the walk holding it while a stranger changed the locks it was supposed to open. I'd worked 14 hours that day. Payroll runs long at month end, and I'd stayed to fix 2 paychecks that would have bounced for people who couldn't afford a bounce check. My feet hurt, my eyes hurt, and I came home to this. "Mom," I said, not loud. The locksmith looked up, then looked back down at his work, the way people do when they've decided something is not their business. The window opened a crack, just enough for her voice to come through. "Your brother is this family's future," she said. "You were just the one who paid." A pause, and then, almost gently, like it settled the matter, "Grant's moving into the back room this week. It's time. Like there had been a schedule I hadn't been shown. I want you to understand something before the rest of this, because the rest of this is going to sound impossible by the end. I had set up the auto pay that my family had come to believe was just how the bills got paid, like the mail arriving, like the sun. I was not a guest in that house. I was the reason it was still standing. And my phone, in my other hand, lit up while the drill kept whining. A reminder I'd set months ago, glowing up at me through the dim, wet evening. I glanced at it. Then I put it face down against my leg, because the locksmith was watching and the thing on that screen was nobody's business yet. Not his, not the neighbors who had started to drift toward their porches, and not my mother's. That reminder was the reason they would need me back by Friday. They just didn't know it yet, and neither, completely, did I. I closed my hand around Dad's key, the one nobody on that porch knew still worked. The key had been my father's, and he gave it to me on a Tuesday in March, 4 years before any of this. He was sick by then. Not bedridden, not yet, but slower. The way he got toward the end where everything took him a beat longer than it used to. We were in the kitchen, the same kitchen this all comes back to, so hold on to it, and he had me sit down at the table while he went to the drawer by the stove. The junk drawer. Batteries, rubber bands, a flashlight that never worked. He dug around in it for a while and came back with the old key. It wasn't the shiny kind they cut at the hardware store. It was the original, the one that had come with the house when he and Mom bought it in 1986, brass gone soft and gold at the edges from 40 years of hands. He put it in my palm and closed my fingers over it with both of his hands, and his hands were cold even though the kitchen was warm. "This house stays open to you," he said. "No matter what happens in it, you hear me? It stays open to you." I thought he was being sentimental. He'd been doing that more since the diagnosis, saying things with weight that didn't seem to need the weight. I told him, "Okay, Dad," and I put the key on my ring, and I honestly forgot about it for a long time. It just rode around in my pocket with my car key and my office key, one more piece of brass. Here's the practical truth, the one plain sentence this whole story stands on. I had been the one paying to keep that house alive year after year, while they treated it like the bills paid themselves. That last part is what mattered. Because if I stopped paying and standing on that lawn, watching a stranger drill out my father's lock, I was starting to think very seriously about stopping. The whole thing came down. Not slowly. Not someday. by a date that was already circled, lit up, glowing face down against my leg, but I'm ahead of myself. Back then, that March, I just had a cold key in my hand and a father telling me the house would always be open to me, and I believed him the way you believe someone you love who is running out of time. Completely, and without checking. The roof went the winter after he died. It started as a stain on the kitchen ceiling, a brown ring that got bigger every time it rained, and then one night in February, the drip became a stream, and my mother called me at 11 at night to say water was coming through over the stove. I drove over. Of course I did. I put a pot under it and a towel under the pot, and the next morning I called 3 roofers and got the cheapest one who wasn't a disaster, and I stood in the driveway in the cold while 2 men I was paying climbed up onto my father's house and tore the bad section off. It was 16 degrees. I remember because the foreman kept saying it like it was my fault, like I'd ordered the weather along with the shingles. $11,000. I put part of it on a card and paid the rest out of the account I'd been quietly feeding for years, the one nobody asked about. My mother came out once, in her good coat, holding 2 mugs of coffee. She gave one to the foreman, not to me. She stood next to me watching the men work, and she said, "It's good of you to help your father like this." He had been dead for 8 months. I didn't correct her. That was the thing about me back then. I didn't correct people. I let the wrong version stand because correcting it felt like making a scene, and I had been trained my whole life not to make a scene. So, I drank no coffee, and I watched my money go up a ladder, and I said nothing. That was the same year my mother started moving Grant's things into my old room. I noticed it slowly. A box of his stuff in the corner, one visit. A second box, the next. Then his weight set, then his computer monitors, until the room I'd grown up in had become a storage unit for my brother's life, and when I finally asked about it, my mother looked at me like I'd asked something rude. "He needs the space," she said. "You don't even live here." I didn't live there because I had my own apartment, which I paid for, on top of the house I was also paying for. But she said it like I'd been gone, like I'd left, like the absence was a choice I'd made against the family instead of the most basic adult thing a person does. The boxes kept coming. I see it clearly now, looking back. It wasn't storage, it was an eviction, started quietly, a year before they got around to the locks. They were moving me out one cardboard box at a time and calling it making room for Grant. I just didn't have the word for it yet. I would, by Friday. So now you know what I knew, standing on that wet lawn while the drill wound down. The locksmith stood up. He tested the new deadbolt with his own key, slid it smooth, and started packing his bits back into their little foam case. He wouldn't look at me. The neighbors would. Mr. Alvarez across the street had come all the way down to his mailbox to not check his mail, and the Pearson woman 2 doors down was standing on her porch with a dish towel, watching. My mother came out then. Now that the door was done, now that it was safe, she came out onto the step in her slippers with her arms still crossed. "Don't make this ugly," she said. "You put my clothes in the grass," I said. "It's already ugly." "Grant's situation is complicated right now," she said. "He's going through a lot. He needs to be here, with family, where we can help him get back on his feet. You're stable, Maya. You always land fine. You don't need us the way he does." I had heard versions of this my whole life. Grant's going through. Grant just needs a little help right now. My brother was 40 years old, and he had been getting back on his feet since he was 19, and every time he stood up, it was on a floor somebody else paid for. "I pay for this house," I said. And there it was. Her face did the thing it always did when money came up, a little tightening at the mouth, like I'd said something crude at the dinner table. "Your brother is the family's future," she said. "You were just the one who paid." She said it on the lawn, in front of Mr. Alvarez and his mailbox and the Pearson woman and her dish towel. She said it the way you'd state a fact that everyone already knew and was tired of pretending not to. The future and the one who paid. 2 different things, and she just told me which one I was, out loud, where the whole street could hear. Something in me went very quiet, not broken, quiet. The quiet of a person who has just been handed the last piece of information she needed. I looked down at my hand. Dad's key was still in it. "This house stays open to you." I stepped past her, up onto the step, and the neighbors went still, and I put my father's old key into the brand new lock the family had just paid a stranger to install. It didn't fit. That was my first thought. The half-second of panic, new lock, old key, of course it won't fit, you fool. You're about to humiliate yourself in front of the entire street. But it slid in. and standing there with the key turning, I understood why. They had replaced the deadbolts, the shiny new ones up top, the third lock my mother had ordered added. They had never touched the original handle lock, the one from 1986, the one Dad's key had always opened. Nobody had told the locksmith to change it because nobody in that family had ever once dealt with the house, and not one of them knew the difference between a deadbolt and the lock that actually let you in. I turned the key. The lock turned with it. That soft, heavy, familiar give I'd felt 1,000 times as a kid coming home, the exact weight of it, and the door swung open into the front hall under my hand. I heard the Pearson woman make a small sound on her porch. I didn't go in. That's the part I think about most. I had the door open, I had every right to walk into the house my name was on, and I didn't. I just stood in the open doorway with my father's key in the lock, and I turned around and looked at my mother on the step below me. She had her hand at her throat. She was staring at the open door like it had spoken. "This was always open to me," I said, quiet, just for her even though the street could hear. Dad made sure of it. Then I took the key out and I pulled the door shut myself, closed it gently, on my terms, and I went down the steps past her and I picked my wet suitcases up off the lawn, one in each hand, and I walked to my car. I did not slam anything. I did not cry where they could see. I drove 3 blocks, pulled over under a streetlight, and sat there shaking with my hands on the wheel for a while. Then I turned my phone over and finally looked at the reminder that had been glowing all evening. And I understood that the house I'd just locked behind me was about to need me far more than I had ever needed it. They just didn't know that part yet. It took 2 days for the first piece to surface, and it came from Mr. Alvarez of all people. He called me. He'd had my number for years, from a time I'd helped him with some tax paperwork, and he was careful about it, the way decent people are careful when they're telling you something they think you should know, but don't want to be the one who told you. He said there'd been people at the house, not movers, men with a clipboard, a woman in a blazer, walking the property, taking photos of the outside, measuring. "Looked like an appraisal to me," he said, "the kind you get for a loan, on the house." And then it landed, all at once, the way the cold water had come through the kitchen ceiling years ago, slow, then all at once. The lockout wasn't just cruelty. It wasn't only about making room for Grant. They were trying to refinance the house, pull money out of it, and they couldn't, not cleanly, with my name sitting on the deed beside theirs. I was a complication on the paperwork, a signature they'd need, or a person they'd have to explain. So the simplest thing, in my mother's mind, was to make me gone. Out of the room, off the lawn. So far outside the family that when the questions came, I wouldn't be standing close enough to answer them. They hadn't thrown me out because Grant needed space. They'd thrown me out because I was in the way of the money. I sat with that for a long time. And the cruel little phrase came back to me, sitting there in my apartment with the lights off, "Your brother is the future, you are just the one who paid." She'd meant it as a ranking. The future and the help. But turning it over in the dark, it started to curdle into something else, something that wasn't an insult anymore. Because if I was the one who paid, if I had always been the one who paid, then maybe being the help wasn't the powerless thing she thought it was. Maybe it was the opposite. The one who paid. They had no idea what they'd just said. The one who paid. They had no idea what they'd just said, and Friday was coming whether they understood that or not. The mortgage servicer called me Thursday afternoon. Me. Not my mother, not Grant, me. A woman named Diane from the loan servicing department, very polite, very procedural, asking to confirm I was Maya, a party on the account. I said I was. And then she told me, in the flat, careful way those people are trained to talk, that the loan was in serious default. The refinance they'd apply for had fallen through, the appraisal, the very one Mr. Alvarez watched them run, had come back and the numbers hadn't worked, and somewhere in the scramble, they'd stopped making the regular payments entirely, betting on a new loan that never came. The account was behind. Badly. $46,300 behind between the missed payments and the taxes and the insurance that had lapsed. And then Diane told me the part I made her repeat twice. The bank could only take the cure money from a verified party on the account, and my name was on the deed, and every payment that had ever cleared on that loan had come from my account, the one they could see and confirm. Grant's money, my mother's money, came from somewhere the bank didn't recognize and wouldn't take, not before a Friday deadline. The only clean money, the only trusted name was mine. Grant couldn't fix it. My mother couldn't fix it. They tried, Diane was too professional to say so, but I could hear it under her words, that other people had already called, already pushed, already been told no. The bank wanted me. The one they put on the lawn? I thanked Diane and I hung up and I sat in my car in the parking lot at work and I laughed. Not a happy laugh, the kind that comes out when something is so exactly, perfectly turned around that your body doesn't know what else to do with it. My phone rang while I was still sitting there. My mother, I let it go, it rang again. I let it go again. The third time, I picked up, and before I could say anything, I heard her and she was crying. Maya, she said. Maya, honey, we need you. We need to talk. Can you come to the house? Please, please come to the house. Honey. She hadn't called me honey in 15 years. I'll come tomorrow, I said. I'll come Friday. And I hung up because Friday was the deadline, and I wanted to walk into that kitchen knowing the clock was running, knowing that every hour they had left was an hour I controlled. I came to the house at 10 on Friday morning. I used Dad's key. I didn't have to. They'd have opened the door the second I knocked. They were waiting for me, but I put my father's key in the lock and turned it and let myself in because I wanted them to see me do it. I wanted the first thing in that house on that morning to be the door opening to me. They were in the kitchen. Of course they were. Grant at the table with his laptop open, doing the thing he did where he looked busy with paperwork he didn't understand, and my mother by the counter, and the air in there was thick and stale, the air of a room people have been arguing in for days. The cure file was on the table. The servicer had emailed it to me, every page, and I'd printed it, and I set my copy down next to Grant's laptop. A neat stack. $46,300, and the one signature line that mattered, and the name typed under it was mine. They'll only take it from me, I said. You already know that. That's why I'm here. Grant started talking. He had a plan, he said. He'd been working on it. If I just signed and let him handle the rest, he had people, he had options. This was all a misunderstanding with the bank. Grant, I said, you've been getting back on your feet for 20 years. I'm not the floor anymore. And my mother who had stood at that window and watched my suitcases lie in the wet grass, who had said what she said on the lawn in front of the whole street. My mother came around the counter and she sat down. Not in a chair. On the floor. She lowered herself down by the table leg the way her knees would barely let her, and she took hold of my sleeve, and she begged. Please, she said. Please, Maya, we'll lose everything. The house, all of it, your father's house, please. You're the only one who can. You have to. There it was, the whole thing, turned all the way around, the one who paid. My hands started to shake. I'm not going to pretend they didn't. This was my mother on the kitchen floor with her hand on my sleeve, and some part of me that was still 9 years old wanted to get down on the floor with her and fix it, fix all of it, be good, be the one who manages, the one who always lands fine. My throat closed. I had to stop and start the next sentence over because the first time it wouldn't come out. I looked at the key in my hand. This house stays open to you. He'd known. Somehow my father had known that one day I'd be the only thing standing between this house and the bank, and he put the key in my hand and told me it stayed open to me, not them. Me. I took a breath and I got my voice back. I'm going to save the house, I said, because Dad asked me to keep it open and I keep my promises. But I'm not saving it for you to refinance behind my back the next time Grant needs money. The deed gets fixed first. In writing. My name protected, the payments through me, where I can see them, or I walk out that door and you can explain to the bank why nobody signed. My mother's face cracked, not into anger, into the thing under the anger, the recognition, the understanding that the daughter she put on the lawn was the one holding the house in her hand and had been all along and knew it now. That's not, she started. That's the only version where the house survives, I said. You can take it. Or you can keep the version where I was, just the one who paid. She took it. I signed the cure on Friday, before the deadline, with a lawyer I chose, with the deed correction filed the same week. I saved the house. And then I picked up my keys, my car key, my office key, and my father's old brass key, and I left, with both of them watching me go through the door that had always opened to me. Grant called me the following Tuesday. He'd had an idea, he said. He'd talked to somebody, a guy he knew, and there was a way to handle the payments going forward that would be simpler for everybody, meaning a way that ran the money back through him, back through the old arrangement, the one where I paid and he decided. I told him the payments went through me now, in writing, and that the lawyer had the deed and that the bank had my number, not his. There was a long silence on the line. Then he said, "You really changed, you know that? Like it was an accusation." "No," I said. "I just stopped paying for the version of me you preferred." Word went around the family the way it does. An aunt called, "Careful, fishing." She'd heard there was some trouble with the house. She'd heard I'd taken over. I told her the plain truth because I was done with the soft wrong version standing in for the real one. I told her the house had nearly gone to foreclosure, that the bank would only take the money from me, and that I'd cured it and corrected the deed. You could hear her doing the math on the other end of the line, recalculating, because the story she'd been told for years was that I was the difficult one, the cold one, the daughter who drifted away from her poor mother, and the math wasn't adding up to that anymore. The math was adding up to a house that would have been gone if not for the one they'd thrown on the lawn. That was the part that spread. Not my version of events, the bank's. The neighbors had watched the suitcases hit the grass and watched the door open to my key, and now the family was quietly learning the same shape of thing from the inside, that the person they'd ranked last was the only reason any of them still had a roof. Nobody apologized. That's not how my family works. But the ranking was broken, and everyone could feel it, even the ones still pretending not to. It's been about 8 months now. I see them at the things you can't skip. A funeral in the spring, a great uncle, and we stood in the same pew and were polite. And that was the whole of it. My mother sends a text on holidays, short ones, careful ones, the kind you send to someone you're not sure you're allowed to need anymore. I answer them. I don't go to the house unless there's a real reason. And when I do, I knock now. I don't use the key. I made that choice on purpose. The key proved what it needed to prove. The house is safe. The payments run through me. The deed is clean, and nobody refinances anything without my name on it in ink. Grant moved out of the back room eventually, off to some new arrangement that wasn't my problem to fund. My mother lives there still, in the house her daughter saved, and I think she understands now, in the way she's capable of understanding, what that means and who did it. I keep my father's key on a hook by my own front door. My apartment. A door that was never theirs, in a place that was always mine. I don't carry it anymore. I just like knowing where it is. Because here's the thing I finally understand. The thing it took suitcases on a wet lawn to teach me. A house remembers who kept the lights on, even when the people inside it pretend not to. The door knew me before they did. It just took the rest of them a default notice to catch up. If you've ever been the one who quietly held something together while everyone else took the credit, I think you already knew how this story had to end, and I think you needed to watch it end this way. There's another one going up soon, a different family, a different kind of quiet that finally got loud. Subscribe and ring the bell so the door stays open on that one too. I'll see you there.